Earth unveils its true power. You picked the wrong planet. The massive view screen aboard the EDS Intrepid flickered to life, displaying what could only be described as the galaxy's most impressive traffic jam. 3,000 Calaxian warships had materialized in Earth's orbit, their angular hulls reflecting sunlight like a disco ball convention gone horribly wrong. Admiral Blake Reynolds stood at his command station, coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips. "Well," he drawled, "looks like someone forgot to RSVP to the party." The bridge crew maintained their professional composure, though a few snickers escaped. They'd been expecting something like this for months, just not quite so theatrical. "Admiral," Lieutenant Rosa Park called from her communications station, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "We're receiving a transmission from their flagship. She squinted at her display. "The Unstoppable Dominion." "Unstoppable Dominion?" Reynolds set down his coffee with deliberate care. Someone's compensating for something. The main screen switched to show a Calaxian commander, his purple-scaled face adorned with the traditional markings of their military elite. The alien's mouth tendrils twitched with barely contained superiority. "Attention primitive Earth forces," the commander began, his universal translator, making him sound like a particularly pretentious butler. "I am Supreme Commander Vex, of the glorious Calaxian Empire. Your planet's defiance ends today. Surrender your..." Reynolds raised a hand, cutting him off. "Hold that thought, Commander. Your ships are currently parked in a restricted zone. Did you miss the signs? They're clearly posted in 15,000 languages." Vex's tendrils writhed in confusion. "You dare interrupt." "Also," Reynolds continued, checking his watch, "you are blocking the shipping lanes. We've got 3 cargo vessels full of ice cream heading to the Andromeda colony, and you know how cranky they get without their rocky road." The Calaxian commander's scales darkened with rage. "This is not a joke, Admiral. We have come to make the same mistake every other empire has made this century." Reynolds smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You know, Dahir is a betting pool in the officers' mess about which alien civilization would be next to try this. I had my money on the Zanari. Now I owe Captain Chen 20 credits. Vexer slammed his fist down. "Enough. You have one planetary rotation to submit to our authority, or we will demonstrate the true power of the Calaxian Empire." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the bridge in momentary silence. "Well," Reynolds sighed, picking up his coffee again, "that was certainly dramatic." He took a careful sip. "Lieutenant Park, please inform Defense Command that our unwanted guests have arrived. And someone wake up General Chen. She'll want to collect her betting money before we have to blow up another alien armada." As the crew carried out his orders, Reynolds stared at the assembled Calaxian fleet. They had no idea what they'd just started, or rather, what they'd just ended. Earth had been playing nice for far too long, and some lessons could only be taught the hard way. The Emergency Operations Center beneath Mount Rushmore buzzed with controlled chaos as Earth's defense leaders filed into the titanium-reinforced chamber. The room, despite its underground location, somehow managed to feel both claustrophobic and unnecessarily vast at the same time. General Mei Chen stood at the head of the obsidian conference table, her poker face firmly in place as she collected credit chips from various losing bettors. "Thank you for your contributions to the which alien empire will try to invade us next fund, ladies and gentlemen." Admiral Reynolds slumped into his chair, sliding a credit chip across the table. "You know, Maya, sometimes I think you have inside information." "I just understand stupid better than most people," Chen replied with a shrug. "Now, shall we discuss our uninvited guests?" Commander Tessa Martinez stepped forward, her quantum tablet projecting a holographic display above the table. "The Calaxians have been busy little bees," she announced, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. "In the past 3 months, they've violated our border treaties 47 times, attempted to plant surveillance devices on 17 of our colonies, and tried to hack our defense networks approximately 2,400,002 times. How'd that work out for them? Colonel Jack Harper asked, feet propped on the table. Martinez grinned. Remember those fake defense plans we planted in the quantum network? The ones about our fleet being powered by hamster wheels and rubber bands? Laughter rippled through the room. They believed every word, she continued, flicking through more holographic displays. But here is the interesting part. Their fleet formations suggest they think they found our weakness. According to their calculations, Earth's defensive capabilities are limited to what they've observed in our public demonstrations. Admiral Reynolds snorted. You mean they actually bought the story about us still using nuclear weapons as our primary defense? Hook, line and sinker, Martinez confirmed. But now for the real fun part. She tapped her tablet, and the hologram shifted to show a massive underground facility. While they were busy watching our hamster wheels, Project Nova Dawn achieved full operational status. All 50,000 quantum-linked defense satellites are in position, completely invisible to their sensors. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "And the gravity web?" General Chen asked, leaning forward. Martinez's smile turned predatory. "Fully operational. One command from this room and we can turn their entire fleet into a contemporary art installation. Very expensive paperweights, if you will." "They have no idea, do they?" Colonel Harper whistled. "That we've been playing technological possum for the past decade." "Not a clue," Reynolds confirmed, finally cracking a smile. "They still think we're the same species that impressed them with our first moon landing. They never figured out why we stopped showing off our advances." General Chen stood, her expression hardening. "Right then, the Calaxians have crossed every line we've drawn in the sand. They violated our sovereignty, threatened our colonies, and now they've brought their fleet to our doorstep. I think it's time we showed them why Earth has remained independent despite being surrounded by so-called superior empires." "Motion to take off the kid gloves," Colonel Harper asked, feet finally coming off the table. "All in favor?" Chen looked around the room. Every hand went up. "Commandez, Martinez." Chen nodded to Tessa. "Prepare a demonstration. Something small but memorable. Let's give our purple friends a preview of what happens when they push humanity too far." As the council members filed out, Admiral Reynolds lingered behind. "You know, May, sometimes I almost feel bad for these empires." "Almost?" "Almost." "Don't," she replied, gathering her materials. "They had plenty of chances to play nice. Now they get to learn why the Zentaur ambassador sends us gift baskets every holiday season." Commander Martinez stood in the weapons control center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the Calaxian unmanned outpost near Jupiter's orbit. The facility hung in space like an oversized purple Christmas ornament, its sensors focused entirely on Earth's fleet movements. "Target locked," Lieutenant Amanda Rodriguez announced from her station. "Nova Dawn Satellite Cluster 47 is in position and synchronized." "Excellent." Martinez opened a channel to Admiral Reynolds' flagship. "Admiral, we're ready for our little science demonstration." Reynolds' voice crackled through the speakers, carrying that familiar tone of someone about to enjoy their job way too much. "Patch me through to our purple friends first. Let's make sure they're paying attention." The main screen flickered to life, showing Supreme Commander Vex's increasingly annoyed face. His mouth tendrils were practically tied in knots. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" he demanded. "Your time for surrender has not yet expired." "Oh, I know," Reynolds replied cheerfully, "but we thought you might enjoy a little show and tell. You see, we noticed you built that lovely outpost near Jupiter without asking permission. That's rather rude, don't you think?" Vex's scales rippled with disdain. "That installation is a legitimate observation post of the Calaxian Empire. Its presence is non-negotiable." "Funny you should say that." Reynolds took a sip from his ever-present coffee mug. "Commander Martinez, would you care to explain to our guests what's about to happen?" Martinez stepped into view of the transmission. "Gladly, Admiral. You see, Commander Vex, while your empire was busy playing spy games, we developed a few toys of our own. Nothing fancy, really, just a little something we call quantum-locked gravitational manipulation." "Meaningless words," Vexa scoffed. "Your species barely understands basic space travel." "Really?" Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, initiate sequence Alpha -7. Low power demonstration, please. We don't want to make too much of a mess." Rodriguez's fingers danced across her console. Sequence initiated. Quantum lock established. Gravitational field parameters set to 1% power. On the tactical display, a web of invisible force lines surrounded the Calaxian outpost. Martinez allowed herself a small smile as she noticed beads of sweat forming on Vex's scaled forehead. "Watch carefully," she said. "This is the part where physics gets really interesting." With a gesture that was completely unnecessary but tremendously satisfying, Martinez brought her hand down. The space around the outpost seemed to ripple like heat waves off hot asphalt. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the station began to fold, not explode, not break apart, but fold like a piece of cosmic origami being crushed by an invisible hand. The supposedly indestructible armor plating crumpled like tissue paper, as localized gravity fields compressed it from all directions simultaneously. Within seconds, the massive station had been reduced to a sphere roughly the size of a beach ball. The silence on the Galaxian command channel was deafening. "Fascinating result," Martinez commented as if discussing the weather. "The atomic bonds held together better than we expected, makes for a much tidier cleanup." Vex's face had turned a shade of purple previously unknown to human color charts. This is impossible. You cannot possess such technology."
"Oh, but that's where you are wrong," Reynolds chimed in. "We've possessed this technology for quite some time. We just didn't feel the need to show it off. You see, unlike some species we could mention, humans don't feel the need to compensate for anything." "This is an act of war," Vexa thundered. "No," Martinez corrected him. "This was a courtesy call. What you do next determines if it becomes an act of war." She nodded to Rodriguez, who pressed another button. The compressed remains of the outpost vanished in a flash of light. "We just teleported your station remains to your flagship's cargo bay," Martinez explained. "Consider it a souvenir. And a warning. You have 1 hour to withdraw your fleet from Earth space. After that, we stop being polite." The transmission cut off, showing Vex's face frozen in an expression of absolute shock. "Well," Reynolds said over the private channel, "that was fun. Think they got the message?" Martinez watched as the tactical display showed panic spreading through the Galaxian fleet, ships breaking formation as captains argued over whether to hold position or flee. "Oh," she grinned, "I think the message came through loud and clear." The next hour would determine whether the Galaxians were wise enough to learn from their mistakes, or foolish enough to require a more forceful lesson in why Earth remained undefeated despite centuries of attempted invasions. Either way, humanity was done playing pretend. The Geneva Peace Center's main conference room sparkled with false promises and diplomatic smiles. Ambassador Zexor sat across the obsidian table, his elaborate robes making him look like a purple peacock who'd raided a jewelry store. General Chen watched him with the patience of a cat tracking a particularly stupid mouse. Next to her, Admiral Reynolds pretended to be fascinated by his coffee cup, occasionally glancing at the tactical display on his neural link. "Surely," Zor's translator purred, "we can reach an arrangement beneficial to both our civilizations. The unfortunate incident with the outpost was clearly a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Chen raised an eyebrow. "Like the misunderstanding of your stealth ships trying to map our defense grid, or the misunderstanding of your spy drones in our colonies," Reynolds added, not looking up from his coffee. Zor's mouth tendrils twitched. "Mere routine surveillance, standard diplomatic procedure." "Standard procedure?" A new voice joined the conversation as Commander Martinez strolled into the room. "Like the antimatter warheads you've hidden in the asteroid belt." The ambassador's scales paled slightly. "I assure you, I have no knowledge of." "Or perhaps," Martinez continued, dropping a data crystal on the table, "you'd like to explain the invasion plans we found in your embassy's quantum vault. The ones detailing how you plan to use these negotiations as a distraction while your main fleet moves into position." Zor's tendrils went completely still. "Those files are encrypted with quantum-locked polymorphic codes." Martinez smiled. "Those were fun to crack. Your cryptographers really should update their software more often." "Impossible," the ambassador hissed. "Our security is perfect." "No," a voice said from behind him. "It really isn't." Captain Derek Stone shimmered into view, his stealth suit deactivating. He'd been standing behind Zor the entire time, close enough to count the ambassador's scales. "Your security," Stone continued, "is so bad that I've been living in your embassy's ventilation system for the past month. Nice place, by the way, though the cafeteria food is terrible." Zexor leapt from his chair, tendrils writhing in fury. "You dare spy on a diplomatic mission?" "Says the person who tried to smuggle a quantum bomb into this building," Stone replied, holding up a deactivated device. "Really? In your ceremonial staff? That's just tacky." General Chen finally stood, her patience visibly evaporating. "Let's stop pretending, shall we? Your fleet isn't preparing for peace talks. They're preparing for a full-scale invasion. The only problem is we've known about it for months, and we've been feeding you exactly what we wanted you to see. Those defense plans you stole," Reynolds added, finally looking up, "we wrote them specifically for you. Those weak points you identified, they don't exist. Even this meeting was just to keep you busy while we finished positioning our real fleet." The ambassador's face had turned an interesting shade of grey. What real fleet? As if on cue, every screen in the room lit up, showing thousands of advanced human warships decloaking around the Calaxian armada. Ships that, according to every piece of intelligence the Empire had gathered, shouldn't exist. "That real fleet," Chen said softly. "The one we built while you were congratulating yourselves on fooling us with your primitive espionage attempts." Zor slumped in his chair, defeated. "What happens now?" "Now," Reynolds stood, straightening his uniform, "we stop playing nice. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, or we demonstrate what our weapons can do at full power." As security officers led the ambassador away, Stone turned to Chen. "Think they'll surrender?" "They better," she replied. "I'd hate to ruin a perfectly good asteroid belt just to make a point."
The hour passed like a glacier on sleeping pills. Supreme Commander Vexor watched his tactical display with growing horror as more human ships continued to materialize around his fleet. The count had passed 10,000, and they were still coming. "Status report," he barked at his science officer. "Impossible readings, sir." The officer's tendrils trembled. "They're ships. They're powered by something we've never seen before. Energy signatures are off the charts." On the bridge of the EDS Intrepid, Admiral Reynolds finished his third cup of coffee. "Time's up, Commander Martinez. You may proceed with the full demonstration." Martinez stood in the control center, surrounded by holographic displays showing every Calaxian ship in perfect detail. Initiating Project Nova Dawn, full spectrum reveal. The space around Earth began to shimmer. Massive structures emerged from seemingly empty void, defense platforms larger than cities, weapon arrays that dwarfed most moons, and a network of satellites so dense it looked like a spider had spun a web of pure energy around the planet. "What you are seeing," Martinez's voice echoed across all Calaxian communication channels, "is about 20% of our actual defense grid. The rest, well, let's just say we like to keep some surprises for special occasions." General Chen's voice joined the broadcast from her command center beneath Mount Rushmore, activating quantum grid nodes 1 through 1 million. The web of satellites pulsed with blue light, connecting in patterns that defied normal space-time geometry. Each intersection point created a micro-singularity, contained and controlled with casual precision. "Fun fact," Reynolds added cheerfully, "those little light shows you are seeing, each one can generate enough gravitational force to crush a planet. We usually use them for waste disposal and recycling, but they work on warships too. Would you like a demonstration?" On the Calaxian flagship, alarms screamed as their sensors overloaded. Vexor watched in disbelief as a small scout ship attempting to flee suddenly stopped. The space around it twisted, and the ship simply ceased to exist, transformed into its base atomic components in less than a second. "That was on the lowest setting," Martinez commented. "Shall we try medium?" Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice carried across the command channel. "Sir, detecting multiple signatures. The Calaxians are trying to power up their secret weapons." "Ah, yes, the planet. Killer bombs you hid in the asteroid belt," Reynolds sighed. "About those." He nodded to Martinez. She pressed a sequence on her console. Throughout the solar system, 50,000 hidden human probes activated simultaneously. Each Galaxian superweapon found itself surrounded by quantum fields that made their own gravity weapons look like toys. See, while you were busy planting your little surprises, Martinez explained, we were building something rather special. Each of those probes contains a miniaturized version of what we just showed you. They've been sitting there, waiting ever since you started hiding your weapons. The probes pulsed once. Every Galaxian superweapon vanished, converted to harmless energy that dispersed into space. Additionally, Chen added, we took the liberty of upgrading your ship's computer systems while you weren't looking. Captain Stone. In the Galaxian Command Center, Stone's voice emerged from their own speakers. Thanks to the back doors we installed during our routine diplomatic visits, I now have complete control of your fleet's primary systems. Watch this. Every weapon system in the Galaxian Armada powered down simultaneously. Emergency bulkheads sealed, trapping crews in their sections. Life support remained active. The humans weren't monsters after all. Don't bother with manual overrides, Stone continued. We replaced those too. Quality control is important, you know. Vexer, his proud bearing finally shattered, slumped in his command chair. How? How did you hide all this? Hide? Reynolds laughed. We didn't hide anything. We showed you exactly what we wanted you to see. You just made the mistake of thinking that was all we had. Martinez brought up a final display showing the full extent of Earth's defense network. It extended far beyond the solar system, a vast web of technology that made the Galaxian Empire's finest achievements look like stone tools. This is who we really are, Chen declared. Not the primitive species you thought you could conquer, not the easy target you imagined. We are humanity, and we have been preparing for this moment since we first looked up at the stars. The funny thing is, Reynolds added, we would have happily shown you all this if you'd just asked nicely. We love giving tours. But no, you had to go with the whole invasion thing. The quantum grid pulsed again, this time forming a sphere around the entire Galaxian fleet. Not threatening, just containing. So, Martinez concluded, shall we discuss the terms of your surrender? And please, take your time deciding. This is actually helping us test our new containment fields, and the data we're getting is fascinating. In the silence that followed, the only sound was Reynolds pouring himself another cup of coffee. 3 weeks later, Admiral Reynolds stood at his favorite observation window aboard the EDS Intrepid, watching the last enemy ships warp away. Their retreat looked less like an organized military withdrawal, and more like a cosmic walk of shame. The Galactic Council is in an absolute tizzy, Martinez reported, apparently revealing that the supposedly primitive humans have been the most advanced species in the galaxy all along has caused quite the diplomatic stir. I imagine the other empires are nervous, Reynolds mused, sipping his coffee. The Zentaur ambassador just sent us another gift basket. General Chen's hologram materialized nearby. This one includes a formal alliance proposal and what appears to be his firstborn's hand in marriage. Politely decline the marriage, Reynolds chuckled, but the alliance might be worth considering, especially now that everyone knows what we can do. They all stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Humanity had finally shown its hand, and the galaxy would never be the same. They had emerged not as conquerors or tyrants, but as something far more impressive, a civilization advanced enough to hide in plain sight, wise enough to avoid unnecessary conflict, and powerful enough to end one without breaking a sweat. You know what this means? Reynolds sighed contentedly. What's that? We're going to need a lot more coffee.